ABC 10 News at 11 starts now.
Teachers relieved to avoid the stress of in-person learning during a pandemic. But the governor's order presents an overwhelming new challenge.
Being a nurse, almost knowing too much information, it made it worse.
Plus, a military wife watches helplessly as her husband grows sicker with coronavirus while overseas.
But first, we begin with the passing of a towering figure in the civil rights movement. U.S. Representative John Lewis has died. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kimberly Hunt.
And I'm Steve Atkinson. He stood shoulder to shoulder with the legendary Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the struggle for equal rights for all Americans. And now, tonight, tributes are pouring in for the man called the Conscience of Congress, awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama. ABC's Trevor Ault has a look at Lewis's iconic life.
Civil rights icon John Lewis was born outside of Troy, Alabama in 1940, the son of sharecroppers. As a teenager, he was drawn to activism surrounding the Montgomery bus boycott. During the 1960s, he was at the center of nearly every major moment in the civil rights movement, organizing sit-in demonstrations at segregated lunch counters as a student at Fisk University. He was one of the first freedom riders, protesting segregated interstate bus terminals across the South. This photo showing Lewis with a bandage on his head after he and other riders were beaten. Just the beginning of what would be many arrests for the civil rights activist.
We must cry, and we all must cry together, that we want our freedom and we want it now.
By 1963, at the age of just 23, alongside Martin Luther King Jr., he was dubbed one of the Big Six leaders of the civil rights movement, who helped plan the historic March on Washington.
Let us not forget that we are involved in a serious social revolution.
Lewis helped spearhead one of the most defining moments of the era, leading more than 600 peaceful protesters across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama in 1965. Lewis in the front of the pack for that brutal confrontation with Alabama state troopers, now known as Bloody Sunday. He was struck in the head, suffering a fractured skull at the hands of the police.
I was the first one to catch the blow.
Lewis was elected to Congress in November of 1986. He served as U.S. Representative of Georgia's 5th Congressional District, where he continued to get into what he called good trouble.
I got arrested 40 times during the 60s, and since I've been in Congress, another 5 times.
Lewis was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the country's highest civilian honor, in February of 2011. In recent years, he was an outspoken critic of President Trump, skipping the president's inauguration and first State of the Union address. He also took part in widespread protests against the president's zero-tolerance immigration policy.
We are getting in good trouble to set people free. I will go to the borders. I get arrested again.
Lewis often reminded people to choose love over hate.
It doesn't matter whether we're black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. It doesn't matter whether we are straight or gay. We're one people, we're one family. We all live in the same house.
Trevor Ault, ABC News, New York.
Lewis is survived by his son, John Miles. Representative John Lewis was 80 years old.
And if we get it wrong, the implications are deadly, especially for our most impacted communities.
Finally, an answer for teachers trying to plan the start of the school year unlike any other. Governor Gavin Newsom issued a new rule that will likely keep San Diego classrooms locked shut.
Our ABC 10 News reporter Laura Acevedo spoke to a teacher and president of the local union who says a majority of teachers are relieved.
Teachers say they want to go back into the classroom, but tell me they want to do so when they feel it's safe.
It wasn't just parents waiting to hear what the governor was going to announce Friday afternoon regarding schools.
The potential to spread is a big concern among our educators.
Keisha Borden is the president for the San Diego Education Association, a teachers union representing over 6,000 educators.
A lot of our educators have underlying health conditions or have family members with underlying health conditions.
Borden says most of her members were worried about returning to the classroom because of safety concerns.
think the majority of our educators are feeling relieved.
According to the governor's announcement, San Diego County would have to be off of the state's watch list for 14 consecutive days. Borden admits distance learning in the spring wasn't easy, but says the district is working to make things smoother.
Making sure that not only teachers are fully trained, but our students and families are fully trained in those learning platforms.
So for now, the school year will start online, and Borden has this message for parents.
We really want to go back, and we would ask our communities to really follow these guidelines, the same guidelines we've been hearing since March.
Laura Acevedo, ABC 10 News.
San Diego County was placed on the state watch list June 30th after 2 weeks of increasing case numbers. And today we hit a single day record. 634 new coronavirus cases were reported, bringing the total to 22,489. And 7 additional deaths were reported, bringing that total to 472.
And we know many of you are concerned about the impact of the upcoming school year. ABC 10 News is listening. We started the conversation on our ABC 10 News Facebook page, or you can also send us your questions to tips@10news.com.
My husband actually called me on a Monday morning when I was getting ready for work and said he felt like he was having symptoms.
A scare for a local military family. Their loved one infected with the coronavirus while deployed overseas. Our ABC 10 News reporter Anthony Pura spoke with the Marine's wife about the experimental treatment they turned to.
Jennifer and Kyle Dulaney snapped this picture on the day Kyle was deployed to Japan. That was back in April. Earlier this month, Kyle got sick with COVID-19 on a base in Okinawa.
My husband actually called me on a Monday morning when I was getting ready for work and said he felt like he was having symptoms.
And those symptoms got worse, eventually sending Kyle to the ICU.
It was awful. It was awful. Being a nurse, almost knowing too much information, it made it worse.
So bad that Jennifer says her husband qualified for the drug remdesivir. Described to her as experimental, doctors needed her permission in order to give it to her husband.
I know where COVID can go. They can spiral downhill very fast. Working with patients that have this, I've actually have friends that have had COVID that have been in pretty bad shape. I didn't want my husband to go there. So for me, the benefits outweighed the risks.
On the 5th day, Kyle's condition began to improve. Jennifer says she spoke to him recently.
They were drawing his lab work because that's one of the things with the experimental. They have to watch labs very closely. But he actually laughed on the phone. He actually was able to talk to me without coughing through it. It was amazing.
While Jennifer and Kyle were going through this very trying time, Jennifer took a leave of absence from her job.
I just mentally couldn't be a nurse dealing with my husband.
Her friends started a GoFundMe for her and her family. Jennifer says they've gotten so much more than they expected. She's donating what they don't spend to a nonprofit that helps military families.
It's amazing. So I want to take the remaining and pay it forward.
And Jennifer says her husband will hopefully be out of the ICU in the next day or two. Anthony Pura, ABC 10 News.
We are hoping for a quick recovery. Police had to break up a large crowd of beachgoers throwing a party in Carlsbad. Officers say 50 to 100 young people were drinking near the Rue des Chateaux beach access point on North Ocean Street tonight. The crowd voluntarily broke up when police arrived. Crowds of people not from the same household are banned under the public health order. The Del Mar racetrack is adding an extra day of horse races for the final weekend of the month. This after this weekend's cancellation after a dozen jockeys tested positive for coronavirus. The racetrack is already running a limited schedule of Friday through Sunday with no spectators. Racing resumes on Friday, July 24th, with an extra day being added Monday, the 27th. The final day of races at Del Mar is September 7th.
At least 2 sailors who helped fight the fire on board the USS Bonhomme Richard have tested positive for COVID-19. At least 27 people who were in contact with them, they are now in quarantine. Today, one of the Navy's top officers, Admiral Mike Gilday, met with the sailors and crews who fought that fire. He says the 2 biggest obstacles were the winds and the explosions. The The Admiral says the next steps include a safety investigation, a criminal investigation, and a command investigation to figure out what went right with those procedures that were in place and if they were all followed. They're still trying to determine the future of the Bonhomme Richard.
I am 100% confident that our defense industry can put this ship back to sea. But having said that, the question is, should we make that investment in a 22-year-old ship?
Admiral Gilday promised to share that information from the investigations with the community. He says they are communicating with every ship to make sure they have the proper equipment and training to deal with an event like this. The city of Coronado is debuting an outdoor dining venue this weekend. It's all in support of local restaurants impacted by COVID-19 restrictions. It started today at SPRECKLES Park and goes throughout the weekend. 11 tables will be set out for you to enjoy to take out from your favorite Coronado restaurants. Seating starts at 5 p.m. tomorrow and at 1 p.m. on Sunday. The city has hired staff to welcome guests and will make sure everything is sanitized.
This community has been super great in going and doing takeouts, but it's nice to go and sit somewhere and enjoy the ambiance, and that's what's really inspired us. We just really love our local restaurants and we want to support them any way we can, and we're getting creative, and this is creative.
And you do need to make reservations first before you take a seat. You could do that by calling the Coronado Chamber of Commerce.